set of rules. Hello, everybody. Dr. Rick Wallace dropping in on you. Hope everybody is having an unbelievable start to your week, no matter what you're going through, no matter where you're at, no matter what's happening. Keep your head up, keep focused, keep pushing. If you're still breathing, you're still in the fight. You've heard me say that numerous times. It's something I believe in. It's something I live on. It's something I've definitely had to stand and live on over the past few weeks. But again, I'm still breathing, so I'm still in the fight, and I'm still pushing and fighting. There is no excuse not to put in the work. I want to talk to you today about the state of Black America. So this isn't a one-off thing. This isn't about this thing or that thing. This is about looking at taking a panoramic view at the Black existence currently as it stands and sits in the U.S. to examine where we are, why we're there, what we need to do, and how we need to do it. I will remind you that this organization is self-funded for the most part, and we could use all the support that we can get. I'm one person, and I'm carrying a heavy load, and an even heavier load right now, but I refuse to quit in my work because my work is the reason I'm here. My purpose is the reason I'm here. I'm not one to fold. I'm not one to give up. I'm not one to step back. So again, if you know the work that we do, and you're going to hear a lot about the stuff that's going on and how we're tied to it, the work that we do, show some love, show some support. Click the link in the description box, or you can use the organization's Cash App handle as a way to support the work we do. But let's talk. Anytime you're talking about the state of a people, a group of specific people, Blacks, Asians, whites, Latinos, you have to go to an institution that plays a major role. Oh, before I start on this, sorry. For those of you who need sound bites, I'm not that guy. I'm not the guy that you're going to tune in and within 3 minutes, I'm going to say what I have to say and you got everything. I've been trained my whole life to build. So I build what I'm saying so you can look at it, you can break it down, you can analyze it, you can go back and check it for facts, you can check it for reality, you can do a lot of things, but we do too much sound bites. We got an entire generation that is literally being taught off of memes, no ability to do critical thinking, critical examination, critical research, no means of understanding how, and we want everything to happen for us immediately. And that's how quickly and easily we normally get ensnared by the traps of the enemy, because we want something quick. We're not willing to build. We're not willing to work. We're not willing to examine. I'm not that guy. I'm not the soundbite guy. But I tell you what, if you look in Dr. Blanchard's book, The Black Book of Lamentations, you will find that I'm probably the most quoted person in there, because I put in work and I have studied or served under some of the most powerful minds. And I have such reverence for, from Dr. Francis Cress Welsing, which is the reason that I got into the world of psychology, to Dr. Amos Wilson, who I think is probably the most brilliant mind ever, and a bunch more. There's work to do. And I've done the work, and I just want to share it with you, but I don't know how to do it in sound bites and snippets. So for those people who need that, I'm not that guy. I'm sorry. But when we're talking about the state of a people, the institution that has to be intact for the state of a people to be in progression and in positive movement towards elevation is the family. The individual serves as an institution in itself because individuals get to make decisions. They can adopt values, interests, and principles that serve themselves, but they move individually with no specific united or collective goal in mind. But when you start to talk about a family, you're talking about the coming together of an individual, but the family is anchored by the marriage or anchored by the union of two people who come together to be the source. So you get two people who are of like mind, normally around the same place in their socioeconomic upbringing and background, with a projected idea of what they want out of life for themselves and their progeny, their offspring. Okay, now, why is the family so important? Because it is in the family that the values, interests, and principles that will carry the progeny and others like them in the community is taught in the family. It is inculcated into the minds of young children starting at 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years old, who they are, why they're special, why they're powerful, what life will demand of them. Early on, it's inculcated that this is right and this is wrong. This is what you do. This is not what you do. You're sitting up and you're saying, these are our values, interests, and principles. And if we practice these values, interests, and principles, and we move outward, then we can do some things. We can be autonomous within our social spectrum. We can be powerful within our social spectrum. We can literally establish an autonomous internal economy within ourselves, like Black Wall Street. But we first must have our values, interests, and principles intact. Matter of fact, if you look at how you subjugate a people, it is not with shackles. Shackles hold them physically in place, while the true enslavement is administered, and that's through the mind. And so what do you do when enslaving someone's mind? You first take away their values and their interests and their principles that obtain to themselves. You replace them with the values, interests, and principles that serve the person who is now putting themselves in the position of being the oppressor, the master, or whatever else you want to call it. So what do? The things that our ancestors were robbed of was their name, their history and heritage, their sense of purpose, their own spiritual practices. Why? All of these things matter in the sense of understanding your value and your place in this world. If you go to any other country in the world and look at any other people in the world, their God looks like them. Now, I believe in the source, the higher power, the Most High. But I don't believe in the image that's been presented to me, because I've studied long enough to understand that that image has purpose. See, if I make my God your God, but you don't look like me, the power of image is so important and we miss it. That's why we struggle with self-hatred and how we look, because we don't understand the power of image. We've been given the image that white is better, that the Eurocentric idea of what's beautiful is the right call. No, it's good for them. It's not ours. That's not who we are. We aren't built like them. We don't develop like them. We're different. Our mindsets, mentality, our pineal gland is bigger than theirs naturally. And the pineal gland is way more than just where melanin comes from. It is the spiritual source. So there is a spiritual nature about us that transcends, that has been hidden from us. There's a reason why the nation's capital was built with the specifications of what we found in Kemet. That's why the Tekken or the obelisk is sitting as the Washington Monument. There's a reason. They know things about us that we don't know about ourselves, because they took it from us and they superimposed their own idea of what is. And because we couldn't meet it, because we aren't them, we felt inferior. Well, it's easier to oppress an inferior people. It was Dr. Amos Wilson that said that the first thing that has to happen in order to destroy a people is to destroy the love that they have for one another. And we see that most prevalent now in the family, in the home. we see the rise of a gender war because we don't understand how it came into place and how things were put into motion and how we were turned against one another. And so we now operate with more vitriol towards one another than we do the system. And we don't even see it happening because we have been robbed of our values, our interests, and our principles. In 1960, the average Black child, 75% of children born, Black children born, were born into two-parent households. Over 50 years, that dropped down to 75% born into single-parent households. We are now striving and pushing to get that number back up. Why? Because the optimal upbringing of a child requires masculine energy and feminine energy. It requires nurturing and discipline. It requires a balance between the two. And we were designed by the Most High to operate as a unit. That's why we're different. That's why we have two different strengths. That's why we function and move the way we do. See, the masculine energy and the feminine energy was meant to merge together. And what happens when you merge energy? It syncs. And we call that synergy. What is synergy? Synergy is a force created by two energies when they merge that creates a force more powerful than when they are separated. But what is the force moving? The force is moving separation. The force is promoting separation, individualism, selfishness. Why? Because divided, you're easier to conquer, and you cannot optimize your influence on your child. You can say what you want to say. We have some unbelievable single parents out there. I don't want to take anything from it. I was a single parent. My older kids, I reared. But let me tell you something. I could never have done a better job than if I had a solid wife standing by me and we were rearing them together. I could give them a whole bunch of things financially because we didn't have a problem financially. But guess what? Me being financially astute meant me being moving and doing things in business and whatever else I was doing to get that money. So guess what? I wasn't always present. That left the void. And so there's always these things coming on. That's supposed to be a teamwork. That's supposed to be a connectivity. The Black family is suffering, and therefore we are suffering. We have to look. When you are projected, literally to be irrelevant within the next 18 years within this country, you have to ask yourself why. And how can they project it? Well, they're looking at the fact that we are dividing, that we are separating, that we are not uniting and using our collective power in any scheme. We're not doing it economically. We're not doing it in the educational realm. We're not doing it in the community. We're not doing it politically. So what? We are easily moved. The only time we are together on doing anything is when we vote 90% Democrat and get jacked for it in the process. We're experiencing that exactly right now. And this is no praise for the Republicans, but this is just talking about how we tend to move. The only other time that we show up together is when we get real mad when someone dies because a cop killed them. And then we turn around and we show up and we tear up everything. We can show up to tear up some stuff, but we haven't learned how to come together and show up to build. And that's because we leave the house not really knowing who we are, because the family is not intact. There's going to have to be a revisitation of the Black family nucleus at a level that says we need to start something with this generation of children that re-emphasizes the importance of family. We can't keep procreating and creating kids when both parents aren't in the house. We need to be responsible in procreating. We need to be responsible in looking and seeing how we're going to take care of kids. We need to be responsible in having kids in an environment and in an opportunity where we can financially support them and actually project them out and put them in a better financial position in life than we started with. That's the goal. How you build generational wealth, which is another thing that I planned on talking about doing this, is that you have to have a plan beyond what you're going to do for you. See, when generational wealth is actually in play and working, the money you're earning now isn't yours. You're living off of what was left to you. The money you're earning and building and growing now, that's what you're going to leave. But see, right now, we get six-figure income. They told us if we make six figures, we made it. No, we haven't. Because most of those six-figure gigs are working for somebody else. And the moment that you leave this place, they're going to give that six-figure gig to somebody else, not your child, not your wife. You don't get to leave six-figure jobs behind. You get to leave your wealth behind. Your wealth is your assets minus your liability. That's your net worth. What you have in assets, whether it's liquid, whether it's solid or hard assets, it's what you have minus your debt. So when you take your debt away from what you own of value, and it doesn't have to be cash. Most people think a millionaire has $1 million in cash. Not all the time. In fact, if they are a low-end millionaire, it's most likely they don't. Their millionaire status is probably coming from the business they own or property they own. But it's rarely $1 million sitting in the bank. Now, obviously, when you get up in the 8 figures and on up, now there's definitely some cash in there that qualifies you. But it's understanding this thing about building wealth and how it has to be done. And that needs to also be taught to the children at an early age. You don't start teaching group economics to 20-year-olds after they've had 20 years of hardwiring poor money habits, poor money thinking, poor spending, consumerism into their mindset, and expect that they're going to get the concept and be able to shift. It's not just about whether they can see the concept. There are people that sit up and you can sit up and explain to them the dynamic of money, how it's important to have passive income, how it's important to have multiple streams of income, how it's important to be able to be diversified in the assets that you are invested in across assets, how important that is, how important it is to have compound growth. Compound growth can't be beaten over the long term. And it's something very few of us understand. It's very, very rarely taught. It's something that should be taught in school, but the problem is they don't want you empowered. They don't want you to learn that. They need you to be dependent. They need you to think, even if you're sharp, even if you're smart, even if you're gifted, that you need to come through them to get whatever you want. The idea has still not settled in the minds of most people that now with the internet, there are no limitations. You don't have to ask permission to use your genius to generate something for yourself. So but see, because there's this mindset, see, that's what school does. That's why I tell people all the time, when I wrote The Miseducation of Black Youth in America, which was my 16th book, when I wrote Academic Apartheid, which is my 24th book, both times I told you that true education is a holistic process in which Black children are empowered and prepared to go out into a world that is inherently hostile towards them and not only compete, but win. And so that is so much more than the attainment of academic skills. If you actually go and you look around, some of the biggest minds and biggest money makers now don't have college degrees. Some of the richest people on the planet don't have college degrees, but they got a bunch of people with college degrees working for them. So then, yes, academic skills are necessary at a certain level. But the first thing you must do when educating a child is to tell them who they are. Because if you don't tell them who they are, they have a world that's willing to give them another view of themselves that does not serve them well, but makes the other person a lot of money. And so that's what the school process does. The public school system prepares your children to be plugged in to a system where they will work for someone else their whole entire life, make them rich, and barely get by and hope they can live on their 401k and their Social Security. That's not a plan. And that's not how you build wealth. And that's not how you leave behind a legacy and an inheritance for your children. That means you've got to change your thinking. But again, it starts in the best place for that to start is in the home. See, we don't want to be taught. We want sound bites. We want memes. We want feel good stuff. We want somebody to tell us. We want to be able to point the finger of blame. Let me tell you something. Does systemic racism ooze from the very pores of the fabric of everything that flows through this country? Absolutely. Do you know what saying that did for me and my family? Absolutely nothing. So sitting up talking and saying what's happening, racism is going to exist. Why? Because the people who created it benefit from it. And as long as they remain in power, they will continue to utilize it to hold us at bay because we are the threat to it. And so what do? You got to sit up and say, well, since I'm moving against this system, how do I learn to navigate it and make it benefit me? The status of Black America right now is that we are in crisis. Why? Mental health. Mental health is off the chain. We have young beauty queens jumping from buildings. We have a situation where the leading group of suicides for children 5 to 11 are blacks, and the predominance of those are girls. Then we have a almost 50% jump in spike and increase over the past 6 years in suicides between young black males between 15 and age 24. And yet we don't see a problem. I'm literally every day, I'm being referred young black males under 25 who are struggling to make sense of this life and are on the verge of giving up. I've had families that I've had to work with where kids are jumping in front of trains. Kids, I mean, not 18 yet. And we don't see the problem with that. We don't see how our not setting our children up correctly is putting them at risk. See, back when I was coming up, they had bullies at school. And your parents probably told you, pop him in the mouth, he'll leave you alone. And you were told, man, sticks and stones may break my bone, break your bones, but words will never hurt you, blah, 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 blah. They told you all this stuff, and you kind of got through it. You didn't hear a whole lot of, about suicides at early ages. But here's the problem now. Here's the problem, and I want to try to make you understand it on a psychological level. Everybody is viewing and moving in life based off of their self-image. Everybody talks about self-esteem, self-confidence. But see, your self-esteem and self-confidence is directly related to your self-image or your self-concept. Your self-image and self-concept is how you see yourself in the world, how you see the world around you. How do you feel you fit into the world? What do you think other people think about you in the world? All of those things are conglomerately your self-image. So if you have a self-image that says, man, I come from a line of people who did X, Y, Z, I can do anything, then the way you see problems in life is different. The way you expect things to move in life is different. Also, you understand that you have the power to generate things even when other people don't give you opportunities. So you're not sitting around waiting for somebody to do something for you, out doing it. And anybody who's wanting to be true about it will tell you the people who get on in this world are the people who wake up in the morning and go out and find the opportunities they need. And if the opportunities do not exist, they create them. And that was from George Bernard Shaw. Wasn't mine, but that's that. So in essence, we understand that when you can teach a kid who they are at a level that tells them I can do it, that doesn't rob them. See, we calling them stupid. We calling them dumb. We telling them you're gonna be just like your sorry daddy. You're gonna be just like your stupid mama. You're gonna all these things that are tearing away at their self-image and how they see themselves in the world. And you're wondering why by the time they get out there in the world and the world gets a hold of them, why they are mentally and emotionally fragile. Because we didn't protect them. We didn't prepare them. We didn't build them up. That's what Black Men Lead is about. That's what Restoring Ghetto's Forgotten Daughters is about. That's what the Odyssey Project has been focused on. Creating an environment where we don't lose our identity, because we're in an identity crisis. The mental health crisis can be directly associated with the identity crisis. When you don't know who you are, people will tell you, and it will never be in your benefit. It will be in a way that benefits them. So then what do? We are going to have to go back to the foundation. We're going to have to go back to the roots. We're going to have to look at how we're going to restore the Black family nucleus. And I've heard so many people say it's too late. This is going on. That's going on. This is a problem. And then you've got the Black gender war. And I'm not going to even get into that today, where we are getting a growing number of Black women who are disenfranchised with Black men and vice versa. We don't even have Kevin Samuels if there isn't a large group of men who just simply have an issue with women. It is what it is. Now, I'm not belittling it, because I thank Dr. Tommy J. Curry, Dr. T. Hassan Johnson, for pointing to the fact that there is a very big void in the understanding and hearing of the concerns of Black men. We don't have a space where we can say we're not our best selves, where I'm not feeling myself or I'm feeling vulnerable, because we're considered weak, and we don't want to be considered weak because there's no place in that for us. We've got to always be okay. And we always got to act like nothing's wrong. And the problem is nobody lives this life in a vacuum where nothing's wrong all the time. And what happens is it's called suppression. You're constantly suppressing. You're constantly suppressing. Eventually, pressure builds up when you suppress, because it's only so much room you can suppress in this building. And what happens is when that pressure becomes to a boiling point, one or two things happens in an explosion. It's an explosion or an implosion. You're going to explode and other people are going to get hurt. Or you're going to implode and hurt yourself. But the thing is, we don't want to talk about that. It's much easier to point the finger and blame. And I said this a long time ago. There's enough culpability to go around on both sides. I don't have the ability or the time to sit up and blame anybody, one side or the other. And I said this in a video not too long ago. I said, I am not going to choose sides because both sides have valid arguments, but neither side wants to see it. And that's exactly where they want us. And we don't get it because we're so hurt right now and we're so angry. And the truth of the matter is everybody has a right to feel hurt because you've been hurt. Number one is we haven't dealt with the generational trauma. I did years and years of research in uncovering generational trauma and solidifying my position that it exists. I studied epigenetics for so long that I actually went outside of the scope of why I went in to prove that it could be passed down genetically, which I proved. I went to prove that it can make you more having a past where the family has a history of trauma will also make you more likely to be traumatized when you experience trauma, because not everybody who experiences trauma is traumatized. And there's a whole reason for that. Come to find out in studying epigenetics that a lot of our other problems are coming from the untreated trauma and the environment that it creates now in our current reality. We're learning that epigenetics impacts cancer, epigenetics impacts other chronic diseases, and in illnesses and sicknesses. And these genes are being upregulated and downregulated with our environment. And we are in a currently hostile environment, and we're wondering why the Black man has the shortest life expectancy span. And a lot of it has to do with the violence in the community too. We have to admit that those numbers count too. But we also have to admit that it's some men die. What I looked at when I heard that Kevin Samuels passed away, and everybody knows I've had my differences with primarily Kevin's approach. And some of the concepts. I don't believe in having a high value man without there being a much more descriptive idea besides what's in his bank account. I've seen far too many men with money who were crap. So for me, that wasn't it. But I had some, but you know, I'm not one to celebrate anyone's demise. My heart goes out. But when I heard it, the thing that hit me wasn't that this polarizing figure was dead. It was that's another Black man under 60 that left here too early, who seemed on the surface to be healthy. Now, again, he was tossing those energy drinks back. You could just see pictures when he's floating around the internet. There seems to be an energy drink somewhere nearby. And so you see it. So, but here we are again, another man, I think he was 55, 56 years old. You know, here I am. I've had 5 heart attacks 2 years ago in succession, 5 heart attacks in a week. Now, thank God I survived. Thank God I'm getting stronger. Thank God I'm getting back into good physical shape. Now where I'm able to train, so I'm starting to lose weight and get the old rig back. But that could have went a whole nother way. And so you got to say, what's going on? The stress levels are off the chain. And we don't understand why, because we're not looking for solutions. We are looking for somebody to attack. We're looking for somebody to blame. We're looking for somebody to sit around and rest on and say they need to fix it. Well, the truth of the matter, we need to fix it. We need to fix the broken home. We need to here's why. It's so much easier to use a program like Black Men Lead to properly socialize a young Black male into manhood, so he understands who he is, what he is, why he's important to the community, what his role is as a man, what his role is as a husband, what his role is as a father. And you get that into him. And by the age of 12, he understands from this day forward, I am now becoming. It's easier to do that than it is to take a broken man who you left to himself to figure it out and life has kicked and pissed on, and then tell him he's going to fix it. Because guess what? He's going to end up with your daughter. And whatever woman issues he has, he's going to take it out on her. Whatever issues he has, and it doesn't remove him or justify what he's doing. What he's doing is absolutely wrong. He must be held accountable at the highest level. I do not believe in men putting their hands on women. I do not believe in men mishandling women in any way. And I think one of the things that we have to do, if you look on the Odyssey Project site, You're going to find under the code of conduct that I am very, very emphatic about being very, very assertive in protecting the women and children in the community. One of the, matter of fact, the first principle in the Black Men Lead Rite of Passage uh, program is, the first principle is, a Black man never causes harm to a Black woman or children. Period. You never put your hand on her. You never put your mouth on her. And there's a reason for that. And you're either going to be a builder or you're going to be a destroyer. You can't be both. You can't be on the attack, tearing something down, and building at the same time. So you got to ask yourself, am I building something or am I destroying something? And if I'm destroying something, am I destroying something that's a threat to me, or am I destroying the very thing I should be building? And you've got to do that outside the confines of your emotion, because your emotions will make you feel a certain way. See, your emotions at the right time will make you feel a certain way. And you'll start saying, yeah, women just like that. And the truth is, there are good men and there are good women. There are bad men and there are bad women. And the problem is when you're in a bad place, here and here, you will actually attract the bad person. And so you find yourself in a cycle. It's not, and it'll make you think they're all bad because they keep coming one after another. It's because of where you're at. And nobody's out there lifting our women. Nobody's out there lifting our men. So we're cycling trauma. And then we're expecting the progeny and the offspring from these traumatic bonding experiments to come out and be able to do something we weren't able to do with less help than we had. And we're expecting that to be the fruit of what's going to be Black empowerment. We better stop kidding ourselves. What we're going to have to do is figure out some kind of way to actually come together. I agree with you, CC. It's never too late. This is a conversation that Dr. Claude Anderson and I had, Dr. Joanne Anderson, which is his wife, and I had, is that they believed that it was over, that by 2013, there was no help for us, that, you know, we were permanently locked in the bottom rung of the socioeconomic ladder. We were going to be a permanent underclass in America. I don't believe that. I believe there's too much power in our bloodline. There's too much force in the spiritual existence of who we are. But we're going to have to realize it. It doesn't matter. I have seen a lion born in captivity cower down to a damn dog because he didn't know who he was. Now, in his habitat and being around other lions that would have shown him, even if he born in captivity is ever exposed to other lions and he watches how they move and he starts to see everything gets out of their way, he will know that they're like me. I got that same power. So all of a sudden he'll start making stuff get out of his way. He stopped backing down when somebody clapped their hands or when a little poodle run up on him and bark. And he backs away and gets out the way but that's because he's been trained to respond that the dog is the leader. And right now, a bunch of us are responding to people who aren't our equals and being told and moved and forced into places we don't benefit being in because we don't know who we are. But what we're going to have to do is deal with that. And that's just dealing with them. Then let's talk about Black wealth for a minute. I talked about it a little bit, so I don't have a whole lot to say. And for those of you, I haven't forgotten about you. I started the book project, The Quest for Black Wealth. And I haven't forgotten about you guys. It's still on deck. A lot happened with mental health in the community that took me off of that project for a while. And so I'm back on it now, and we're going to get that done. So I thank everybody for standing behind me with that. Well, here we are. And we have to understand this. There has been an ongoing process to keep us out of the loop of wealth building from day one. Systemic racism in the housing market still exists. I know because I am still affiliated with it. I am aware of it. And what we have to understand is that's just one area. They have been talking since black codes, convict leasing, sharecropping, redlining, urban renewal, benign neglect, gentrification, and any other form of what we know as serial forced displacement, where they are literally consistently, time after time, forcing us out of areas where we had set up and had taken up ownership. They are constantly taking back from us what we are building, and they are doing it systematically. And because we don't come together, because we don't unite, because we don't develop the ability to stand with one another, we never ever sit up and understand how it's being done, and we just keep getting pushed, and they keep taking, and they keep taking. There's a practice now where on a grand scale where appraisers are going in, and if there's any indication that the home is owned by a black family or a black couple, they're underappraising, they're undervaluing the home. We have seen this because in many instances, the homeowners have removed all of the indications of any black ownership and asked white friends to go in and wait for the appraiser, and the value went back up. On the flips, so then they're affecting the value of the house on resale. So now it's messing with your equity that you have in the house, and you're able to build in the house, and the equity is what you own. So most people talk about houses, and because they don't understand assets and liabilities, most people have been taught that when you buy a house is an asset. Not yet. When you first buy a home, unless you pay cash for it, it's a liability. Why? You owe more on it than you have in it. And so it's not an asset. Now, as you build equity into it, it starts to balance on the sheet and move away from liability, closer towards asset. When it becomes an asset is when you have more equity in it than the lender. Now, some people define it differently. Some people say if you have any equity in it, that equity is an asset, but the liability outweighs the asset. So you see what I'm saying? So if I owe more on it than I have equity in it, I still have a greater liability, so it cancels it. So the moment that I own more equity in the home than I have liability or debt in the home, it now becomes an asset at the difference. So whatever I own over what I owe is my wealth in that area. Okay. That's that. So that's the first thing you have to understand, is that a home isn't an asset until you have a greater equity than you have debt in the home. Second of all, that you have to understand that that equity is being interfered with by a practice of undervaluing black homeowners. Okay, in the appraisal process, when you're looking to resell, they are undervaluing. Now, the flip side of it is property taxes, they're being overvalued. So white homeowners are getting lower property evaluations for the tax purposes, while black homeowners are getting higher tax valuation. So they're paying more in taxes than whites. Again, that's a way of taking your money. And you have to understand that. So then you have to understand the process of challenging the appraisal and hopefully winning your dispute. You dispute that appraisal and you have to win the dispute. And that's a whole nother thing. That's just one thing. But so you have to look at, there are all these different practices that we have seen from black codes on up, where they have kept us out of the loop, and we have participated in great fashion. Now, we have had groups in Wilmington, Delaware, in Rosewood, Florida, in Slocum, Texas, and of course in Greenwood, Oklahoma, not Greenwood, Black Wall Street, in Tulsa. And so we know that we can do it, but the problem is, do we have the unified mindset now? Because they've been constantly beating at it. They've been constantly nibbling at it. And now there's this big push for individualism. And now you hear the terms, it's not my business, a lot. You hear the terms, man, let that person do what they want to do. The problem with that is, it's good when it's being said on a small level by them, because on a larger level, they control the power. It's horrible when it's done by us, because we live in a social culture. We live in a social construct. In other words, if you look around you, even whether they're affluent or not, everybody operates in enclaves. Asians have enclaves. whites own everything, so it's their enclave. But Arabs have enclaves. Latinos, everybody has this place where they reside, where everybody comes together and they unify and they create this straight, unified persistence, and they work together, except us. We do not have a unified presence. And because we don't have a unified presence, we are highly individualized. So then we can be taken to our own personal interests, and we never look at things in a pro-social perspective. And when I say pro-social, that means that I'm thinking outside of myself and I'm thinking for the better good. And here's the problem, though. And you can see this really, really good in your high performers, the people who are doing what, your celebrities, your stars, your millionaires, your few billionaires. You see it in them. They're consumed with, hey, I did it, I'm good. And so they'll send that message, well, if I did it, you could do it. Actually tell them the truth. Tell them what you had to give up in order to get there. Tell them that you can't be as focused on them as you would like to be, because you want your money to keep coming in. Tell them the truth. Tell them that they're going to have to unify and actually create their own economy if they want to sustain the growth and wealth that can be collectively experienced. That as long as it's just a few of us, they're going to use the few of us to tell the rest of us that it's us. And they're going to pretend that it's not in the school system, that it's not in the banking industry, that it's not in the housing industry, that it's not in politics, and what they'll tell you is they're going to gaslight you and tell you, well, the truth of the matter is that it's systemically set out there to cipher away from you. You're talking about a Black community where within 6 hours of being paid, your money goes into another economy other than the Black economy, because there is no Black economy. It's going into an Arab liquor store or gas station, an Asian nail shop or beauty supply store. Let's talk beauty supply for a second. The beauty supply industry is dominated in spending by Blacks. It's a $15+ billion a year industry. And I believe 95 to 96% of that is Black money. That's like $14.4 billion coming out of Black dollars. Guess how much of the ownership in that industry? Blacks own about 3 to 5% tops. In an industry, they dominate spending. One of the key rules in collective Black group economics, one of the key elements and components or principles is that if you dominate spending in any industry, any market, you should also dominate ownership. So we're again immediately getting paid, got to go get your hair did, got to get your nails done, got to sit up and get that escapism. So you got to go to the liquor store so you can pretend that it ain't as bad as it is. You're going to get that gas no matter how high it is. And you haven't even left the community, but you ain't spent nothing in it. Everything you spending in it going out of it. And you're wondering why. No matter how well we do with our income. See, the median income for Black men and women isn't that big of a difference. It's $44,000. The median income for Black men is $44,000. And the women, I want to say it's 41,000, something like that. It's not that big of a difference in median income. Now, as you go up higher, there's a little bit of a difference. But in median income, Black men are earning $44,000. Now, first of all, you can't support a family with $44,000. Second of all, it brings me to this argument that you see constantly floating across social media, which is another way to divide Black men and Black women and create a wedge. And that is, all these high-end, high-figure earners who make X amount of dollars, let's say 6 figures, and they taking care of their families and it's doing and you're not a man if you can't do it. If your wife has to pay anything, you can't do it. And it sounds good, and it's the way it should be. You should be a provider, but here's the problem. They created it where the vast majority of you can't. It wasn't an accident. It started in the 60s. That's why they deindustrialized the city. That's why they pulled plants out of the city. Why? Because you didn't have to have an education to make a good enough living to go out and take care of your family. Your wife stayed home, took care of the kids. That created the balance in the home. That changed. They gave women access and moved things in. And this isn't about seeing the woman as the enemy. This is about seeing the subtlety in the system. So what happens? Now you've got this situation where you've got a situation where you got people talking about who can pay all the bills. You know, fortunately, I've been in a position most of my life where that wasn't a problem for me. But what I can tell you is, here are the numbers. 30% of all households, not individuals, 30% of all households in America have 100%, have a $100,000 income. That's households. So that's both parties, husband and wife. That's 30%. That includes all races. So then you start to break it down. It's something less than 13% of blacks earn six figures. So where are all these people with all this paper that's taking care of all these bills? You can be anything you want to be on social media. And it sends a message that if you don't do this, it's something wrong with you. And we don't understand that there has to be an opportunity. So what we make the assumption is, which is a very poor assumption, we make a very poor postulation when we assume that everybody out there is happy with making $44,000 a year. When the truth of the matter, if you actually look at it, that the vast majority of black men are hard workers. They get up and go to work every day. They bust their ass. I see them on trucks all the time. I see them as delivery drivers, busting their ass. I see them as bus drivers. I see them doing a bunch of different things, and they're busting their ass, and they're bringing home a median income of $44,000. And the truth of the matter is, there's so much more power in the unification of who we are as a people to create our own income, take up the earning potential of every person, male or female, and then reduce the cost of what they need to spend on the things they need, because we own it. The grocery store you go to, you're not paying what you're paying over there because we own it. The farms that it comes from, that we stock in the grocery shelf with, we don't pay what they pay because we own it. So now not only are we driving up the ability to earn because we're creating an environment where we are paying ourselves what we are actually worth, now we're spending less because we're also owning the commodities we purchase. We don't go outside of our community unless it's absolutely necessary. We need to have car dealerships. We need to have schools. Higher learning institutions. We need to have places where we are actually doing what we're supposed to be doing. But we actually look at people who are talking about it and say they're crazy, and we go on the attack. When I created Black Men Lead, I said this can change the world, because how Black Men Lead came about was I was concerned with the rising level of violence. This was almost 3 decades ago. The rising level of violence within the community, young black males, and this narrative of black on black crime, which I proved to be a myth. And people say, well, how is it a myth when black kids are killing each other? Because we're not talking about white on white crime. We're not talking about Asian on Asian crime. When you actually look at the phenomenon of murder, you find out that 84% of white people were killed by other white people. We never hear white on white crime. 85, 86% of all violent assaults on white people are by other white people. We don't hear that. And we never hear white on white crime. Why? Because that term was created for a purpose. It was to dehumanize and animalize and criminalize black males and give them an image of being darker and less civilized than everyone else, without observing the environment in which they grew up. And I touched on that. I wrote on that. I brought it out. But in the process of trying to understand that violence, I learned something. Associated with violence was also early dropout rates, high incarceration rates, and the biggest thing was a lack of proper racial socialization. They simply had not been racially socialized into understanding who they were, so that it put a demand and a requirement on them to behave and carry themselves in a certain way to fulfill them. When you give somebody a purpose, they will take that purpose and they will feel it. But if you don't give them a purpose and you tell them they don't have a place and nobody wants them, nobody wants to deal with them, everybody's already ready to say, I told you, you're never going to do that. How many times did I hear I wasn't going to live to be 18? Because I had a quick temper and I was ready to touch anybody that crossed me. But thank God I found enough people that saw something in me that says, you're brilliant. I remember my 11th grade English teacher telling me the word can't will never apply to you. That was powerful. I had people planning that. And because I had that, I had my journalism teacher who got on me about writing a article about absentee fatherhood because she knew I had never met my father. You're listening to a person that never met his father. When I say I never met the man, I mean the first time I saw him was at his funeral. And if you think that doesn't impact you, and I had a man in the house, my great grandparents reared me. One of the most powerful and strongest men I've ever known reared me. But it did not erase that yearning need to know why my father didn't think enough of me to show his face. Now, I have no ill will toward him now. I have some beautiful sisters and a wonderful brother who's an awesome husband and father out of the situation. And we have grown to love each other over the years. We all met as teenagers, where my youngest sisters, the twins, were like 9, but everybody else was teenagers. And we've grown and we have relationships now. And it's because we're all his seed. We're finding out that seeds keep popping up. And that's all good. But I realized that all the success, by the time I wrote The Invisible Father, which was also the name of the article, but by the time I wrote my first book, which was The Invisible Father, Reversing the Curse of a Fatherless Generation, I was in my 30s. And I had been saying I was going to write it. I had done a bunch of writing, but never wrote a book. I said I was going to do it. I had been saying I was going to do it since I wrote the article at the age of 16. And what happened is I sit back and realize that my entire 20s and all the things that I was able to accomplish in my 20s was me trying to prove to a dead man that I was worthy of his love. And it gave me a brilliant insight into what our boys are going through. And it made me understand that I could easily malign them, degrade them, talk about them, or I could acknowledge they are hurting just like I was. And that while I can't save them all, if I can touch the lives of a few, they might change the world. And so I stood up and said, we've got to do something. And I found out that one of the greatest influences of African-American adolescent and young adult male violence is not being properly socialized. When you look at males who have socialized, they're more likely to finish school, which means they're less likely to get arrested and incarcerated, which means they're more likely to gain a higher capacity to earn more, which means, again, that they won't become criminal-minded, that they can sit up and sustain and take care of their families by working through legitimate means. They are more likely to actually become business owners. They are more likely to sit up and become staples within the community. This is proven. I've proven this years ago, and I don't want to take all the credit because it was Dr. Howard Stevenson at the University of Pennsylvania, Dr. Joy DeGruy, who's most famous for post-traumatic slave syndrome, but she also did the work out there in the University of Portland, and she was the one that actually, in I think 2000, created the first African-American adolescent respect scale, because we found out that the number one cause for violence among African-American adolescents was the feeling of being disrespected. And the problem was they didn't even know how to define what respect was, because there was no one to teach them. There was no one modeling it for them. There was no one doing it for them. And so they sit up and they came up in their own through what they were dealing with. So they actually interpreted fear as respect. So if you didn't fear them, you didn't respect them. And so everybody was trying to make somebody afraid, and everybody was taking the next step and the next step. And then they were fighting over stuff that wasn't even theirs. They were fighting over blocks that white people owned. And it bothered me. So I stood up and said, we got to do something. So I developed this program. Now, if you look, the Jews have a rite of passage. And when those young boys pass through that, they have what's called a bar mitzvah. And that bar mitzvah is simply saying that you have taken the journey, and from this day forward, you are now becoming what you were sent here to be, a man. And you know the responsibilities. And having dealt back in another life, having dealt with Jews a lot, because I was in the precious stones, I dealt a lot with loose stones. And so I would deal with them a lot. And I found out that They don't even have to like each other to get together to screw you over. They're just trained that we stick together against anybody else. And they do it. I mean, like, I learned real quick. You're not finna play them against one another. They can be like, I can't stand him, but they're not going to let you win. And we don't have that brotherhood. We have been so robbed of power as Black men that we are highly competitive. That's why if you go off into the community and you look in the church, you got 80-year-old pastors still sitting in the pastoral place when they should be in an emeritus role if they're still alive. Why? Because there's so much more a younger pastor who came up under them that they taught can do and reach. That's a whole population. If you're 80 years old, that's a whole population that cannot relate to what you're saying, no matter how well you articulate it. That's why I spend so much time with younger men, to work with younger men. Matter of fact, I got a meeting with a young brother who reached out to me after seeing a video and said, I want to work with you. You know what that means? I'm going to be able to communicate to him, teach him, and glean to him, and he's going to be able to reach a younger group that's going to look at me and call me school. And if you're from the hood and you don't know what school is, it's what they call people over an age where they think you ain't cool no more. If you're in a good space and you get in called school, it's a level of respect and you take it. But I got to be able to reach people. So then I've got to be able to connect. But what happens is the reason these pastors are still in these places is because that's the only power they've ever experienced. The world doesn't offer it to them. They have to acquiesce in the world and be subservient in so many different ways as Black men, especially those older ones that were alive during the 60s and back in Jim Crow. So being a pastor and having people look at you and give you honor and all that stuff you don't want to let go of. So you don't train people to transcend you because you feel threatened by them. There's a competition. There are even times where I've seen competition in the house because we haven't learned how to stand together. We haven't learned how to move together. We haven't learned how to operate together because Black men think that I've got to be better than you for people to see me. When I was getting ready to start business in my early 20s, and I went to Black business owner after Black business owner, looking for mentorship, looking for some insight into how to start a business. I was blessed enough to be blessed to be doing something where I had capital, but I needed to understand business. And I that's back when cards were everything. People were giving cards before the internet. And they give you cards, they call me, but they never would answer. It was a white man sitting at a bar that looked at me. And I guess obviously by the way I was dressed, he could figure I wasn't average, that I obviously had something. And he reached over and he asked me, what I did for a living. I told him, and he said, okay, what do you plan on doing with the rest of your life? And I said, I want to get into business. I want to be autonomous. And he said, what are you doing about it? I said, well, I got a couple of businesses that I thought were good and I've invested in them. He said, do you know how to start a business? I said, no. He gave me a couple of books to read. He said, when you're through reading these books, call me. Well, less than a week, I called him. If you know me, you know how I read. You're talking to a kid that from the age of 5 to 10 read the entire encyclopedia. It's just how I'm built. But anyway, I call him and he tells me there's no way you read both of those books. So he asked me some questions to check to see if I had actually read it. And he said, wow. And so he took me and he taught me. And he told me, he used to piss me off so much because he tell me, what I'm teaching you, you're going to want to go teach your people and they're not going to listen. He says they are so trained to work against one another that they will not work with you. They will not listen to you as long as they think you're winning. And I faced that so much. That was like one of the most frustrating things because it was true. And so I stood up and said, no, this can't be true when I die. If I had to spend my whole life changing this narrative, I'm going to make you out a lie. And the thing is, that's why I'm a blessing to anybody that comes to me one way or another. I'm going to give you something. People do not come to me and leave the same way. You can ask anybody because that's something my grandfather taught me. He had a second grade education. He had to drop out of school when he was 7 years old to go out in the field. His dad was a sharecropper. He had to go out in the field and help his dad make ends meet. Up 5 o'clock every morning, gassing up a tractor at 7. And so, but something he taught me, he said, boy, you've got to always fill your space. I'm like, Daddy, what do you mean? He said, never go into a room and leave the people in that room the same way they were when you came in. Never come into a person's space and leave them the same way you came in. Well, God has given you. He saw something in me. Forgive me if I get a little emotional, but he saw something in me. He said, never go. He said, there's something special about you. But never, ever go into a space and leave people the way you came. God didn't give you that gift for you. God gave you that gift so that the world will be different when you leave here. And God placed me here to make sure you understood that. And so here I am. What am I trying to say to you? We have a long way to go. We already at an hour and I'm finna shut it down. We didn't even get close to talking about a lot of this stuff. So I'm gonna come back and I'm gonna do a part 2 maybe tomorrow. And we're gonna talk about Black girls, Black boys, mass incarceration, socioeconomic frustration, the miseducation of Black youth. And I kind of touched on some of those. But we have work to do. What I'm going to do, again, we've been on this fundraiser kick since December. We had no movement. No movement. I mean, it's amazing with the work that's done. And again, if you don't understand the cost of research, you can't understand the depth of what happens at the Odyssey Project. I'm talking thousands upon thousands upon thousands upon thousands upon thousands of hours of research to understand the dilemma. I'm not one about talking about what's wrong without having a solution. That's something that the old man taught me too. He taught me, before you come to me complaining, you need to have already tried to fix it, because that's the first thing I'm gonna ask you, what have you done about it? So I was trained early on that you look for solutions. And so I don't talk about stuff unless I have answers. I'm telling you that first we're gonna have to do is we're gonna have to look at the Black family. Then we're going to have to properly socialize young Black males. And being that there's 1.5 million Black men missing, then that means that we're going to have to fill that with some type of program until we can get Black men back in the home. We are going to have to do that. And that's what Black Men Lead is about. And we've been pushing and pushing, and we haven't had any support on a grand level. For those of you that do help us, we've been going since December, and I think we raised $700. That doesn't cover one person for a week. And they keep coming. I'm telling you, the need in the community is so great, and we have no unity. But we can show pictures on social media where we balling out of control, where we traveling and doing all of that, and we don't have any connectivity. And that disjointedness that we are experiencing as a people is going to be the very base of our destruction. Is that we don't have a sense of connectivity. There's not enough connectivity and empathy and awareness of self to see how we are as a people. All of the groups do it, but we are failing in that area. And so I am calling on everyone to start searching yourself to see how you can be a positive force in the rebuilding, number one, of the Black family, proper socialization of young Black males, the protection and the awareness and identity of young Black girls, the holistic education of both, and the development of a unified economy that will sustain us and give us the power we need. They're never going to surrender power to us, people. That's never going to happen. So what are we going to do? We are going to have to sit up and make sure we are becoming autonomous, self-sustaining as a people, or we will eventually just become irrelevant, because they've already replaced us as the largest majority, and everybody's catering to the Latino community now. And it's downhill from here if we don't establish ourselves as a force and a power to be reckoned with. And we cannot do that if we aren't covering and protecting our children. Again, thank you for listening. If you believe in the work we're doing at the Odyssey Project, I encourage you to go into the description box, click the link, and support the work we're doing. If you don't want to click the link, you can always give through the organization's Cash App handle. which is also in the description box. If you have a skill set that you feel would be beneficial to the work we're doing, please reach out to me and email me and reach out just like that young brother did that I can't wait to connect with. And we are going to build something. What I want to do with Black Men Lead is I want to create a national network where in every city there's a program that is socializing young Black males. Because for everyone we socialize, that's one less on the street, one less in prison, one less harming somebody's daughter, and one that will be a positive contributor instead of someone taking away. But we're going to have to do this as a collective. This isn't going to be, you're not going to like it and click it. Now, if you are not a subscriber, please subscribe, because I'm going to keep feeding you guys from both sides of the spectrum, what I do professionally and what I do in the community with my skill set and with my gift. And I hope it blesses you in every way possible. But you are going to have to be willing to get involved on some level. If it ain't your thing to be boots on the ground, fund it. If you know somebody, and the beautiful thing is there's a person that will watch this video that has the ability to sit up and say, you know what, I'm going to sponsor what you're doing. The problem is we're so disjointed and disconnected that it doesn't happen often. You know, every now and then I have somebody say, man, I just got a benefactor or I just got a sponsor. And that's great. And I'm so happy for them because the work that they do is just as important as the work I do. And so I'm happy for them. But we need to get on code. Everybody's on code except us, and we are suffering because of it. So on that note, I'm going to leave that with you. I wish you the best today. I hope that you have an awesome day, but there's work to do. And we can do that and still have fun and enjoy ourselves and be the type of people we're literally just built to be, happy and full of life and love. But we're going to have to first love ourselves enough to take action. And on that note, I'm out of here. You guys have an unbelievable day.